Hello, I am Sasha Stone, and welcome to another live coaching call. This week, I feel inspired to talk about perfectionism. This is a theme that is really present with a lot of people, especially women, but definitely men as well. We live surrounded by really polished images and stories of hugely successful people and ideas of people who have it all together. So with that, there's been created a certain idea of perfection and what that looks like and should look like for most people. And that can actually serve to really demotivate somebody. So rather than serving as a way to propel somebody forward or energize action, it can actually do the opposite. And I see this as a huge problem because if this is something that's going on with you, that means in some way it's really holding you back from doing your work in the world or being brave, taking risks, showing up, whatever it is. So this needs to be handled ASAP. And I can say that from very personal experience because I definitely used to consider myself a perfectionist. And I actually didn't understand why that was a bad thing. To me, everyone should strive for perfection. And now I have a very different view of what that means. So the inspiration for this started last week in a coaching conversation I was having with somebody, and we'll call her Meredith. So Meredith finds that she struggles with sticking to plans, particularly in the area of health and well-being when it comes to any kind of self-improvement. She finds if she can't stick to it in a perfect way, then it just all falls apart completely. For example, if she starts a workout routine and she does it for a few days and then something disrupts that schedule, then she doesn't go back to it. She just throws it out the window because she's lost the momentum and it's no longer perfect in her eyes. So she really feels that perfectionism, or this idea of what is perfect, is holding her back. And something that she's been using, or a strategy she's been using to try to get beyond that, is to do what she can and then say something to herself like, well, that wasn't perfect, but or that was imperfect, but I'm okay with that and I accept that and it's fine as it is. So I asked her if that was satisfying to say that that was imperfect, and she said no, it's not. And of course it's not, because she's a perfectionist and she has a certain vision for what is ideal and what it is that she wants. And if she's not hitting that, then it's not going to feel good. So I really think that there's another way to look at all this and to really see that perfection is something that is constantly shifting and changing when it comes to the human experience, because as humans, we are always shifting and changing, and life changes and throws different things our way, and we take on new challenges. And so because of that, our picture and our vision of what is perfect needs to change with that. And we run into problems when we don't let that be fluid, or when we look at somebody else or an idea that is not relevant to us, and we attach to that as that being perfect. And then when we can't reach that, we feel bad about it, or we don't even move towards it because we think, what's the point, right? So instead, what's important is to look directly at your life, your situation, even in this day, today, what is going on with my life, and where do I want to focus my priorities and my energy, and therefore what is perfect for me or to me at this time. So if you look at something like exercise, for example, and wanting to get those workouts in, it's not just about that. You need to look at your life as a whole, right? What else is important to you? Maybe you work, so that's important. Maybe you're married or you live with your significant other and time with that person is important. Perhaps you have a child or children and spending time with them is important. So there are all these priorities. Maybe you have other hobbies, like you like to paint or write, and that's important. So it's not just the one thing, it's all those things. And where do you want them to fall in your life? And therefore, what is perfection to you? So looking at all those circumstances, so coming back to this client, Meredith, she's married, she has a 5-year-old, and she works full-time. So that's a lot. Therefore, working out for 90 minutes, 6 days a week, might not be possible for her right now. Yet, if she's holding that as perfection, and she identifies as a perfectionist and feels if she can't do that, then don't even bother doing it at all, then that's not going to serve her in any way. However, if she stops to look at the whole picture of her life and all of her priorities, then what's going to happen instead is she might adjust her idea of what is perfection for her. So maybe it's 30 minutes, 3 days a week. And she picks a time that works for her, that's doable, that fits in with her schedule. And then that is perfection. And then if on one of those days there's something unusual going on, like she has a big presentation for work, that's going to take up the whole day, and she can't get to her 30 minutes, then that is a perfect day for her, just completing that big task. So you see, it's not about accepting the imperfect. It's about understanding that we are constantly adjusting what is our perception of perfection. And perfection is fluid, it's highly subjective. You know, another thing she brought up is that her husband said to her, "You're perfect to me." And I said, well, that's because you are his perfection. You're everything he ever wanted and more. And so that shows you that, you know, perfection is completely up to you. It's up to all of us what it is. And by holding this ideal that doesn't in any way relate to you, that's not serving you in any way. So adjusting your idea of perfection and seeing that you can create it in any given moment is going to be so helpful for you if this is something that you struggle with. So I want to give you a strategy that was so hugely helpful for me in overcoming this. And it's so simple, and usually the most powerful things are the most simple. And it's basically coming up with something that you can say to yourself when you feel like you're falling under the spell of perfectionism and that that's holding you back from doing something you really want to do or you need to do. Because to me, that's just contradictory. If you hold yourself to high standards, that means that you have big visions and there's things that you want to get done, then you don't want to be holding yourself back in any way. And so having something that you can say to yourself that is going to remind you that the important thing is to move forward. The important thing is to take action. And so I call these slogans, and there are many, and I'm going to give you 3 that might be helpful for you, and you can also create your own. So the first one is perfectionism leads to procrastination, leads to paralysis. And this is really the crux of the issue with perfectionists, is that whatever the vision is seems so far out there that you procrastinate, and then you procrastinate for so long that you're actually not making any progress at all. So I learned that slogan in Al-Anon, which is hugely helpful for me for overcoming perfectionist issues. And I would literally, if I had something I wanted to do or needed to do, my problem was I would see it as this massive monumental task. And then I would keep putting it off until there was the right moment to work on it, or I had enough time, or my perception of having enough time. And what would happen is when I would feel myself doing that or putting it off, I would just say that perfectionism leads to procrastination, leads to paralysis. And that would remind me, oh yeah, I need to break out of this and remember that the important thing is to just take action. And what would happen, I would get to it and it would take, a third of the time that I thought it was going to take, or what I was making it take in my head. And the action is what is so satisfying. The action is what creates movement. Another one that I love is that perfectionism is 80%, or 80% is perfectionism. So we tend to see, like, if it's not 100%, it's not good enough, it's not perfect. Well, what if you adjusted that percentage and said, well, 80% is perfection? How freeing is that? And know that you can adjust that number, because tomorrow, maybe 60% is perfection. So again, perfectionism is fluid and constantly changing, and you get to decide what it is for you. Another one that is so simple that my yoga teacher taught me is just do it. So again, when I would hear myself saying, oh, I don't have enough time, or I need to wait until this and that and the other thing, I would say, just do it and get to it. And then it's done. And that feels amazing. So remember, what's important is to take some kind of action so that you can feel the satisfaction of that momentum. So as I said in the beginning, if perfectionism is something you're struggling with, you're probably holding yourself back from doing some really important things, like taking care of yourself, or working on your dream project, or connecting with people that you haven't been connected to in a long time because you think you haven't been a good enough friend. Who knows what it is, but somehow it's holding you back from something. And when you can let this go, that's when you start to make amazing movement in your life and things start to happen. So interestingly enough, on the weekend, I was at this incredible event. There were all these amazing speakers, and then they opened up the floor for 10 people that wanted to come up and speak for 3 minutes. This was an outdoor party. I had already been in the pool, so I had like half-dried pool hair, no makeup, and nothing prepared. But this idea of perfectionism was on my mind because of that conversation I had had last week. And so I raised my hand and I went up and spoke. Completely not an ideal situation, no preparation. I wasn't looking how I might want to look if I'm speaking in front of 80 people, and I did it anyway. And it was extremely exhilarating for me and fun to just do it. And then what happened, I was able to positively benefit the people in the audience. And then as a result, people came up to me afterwards and I made some amazing new connections. So if I had been overly concerned about perfection, I wouldn't have done that. And therefore, the people in attendance would not have benefited from my message, and I would not have benefited from making those new connections. Another thing that was interesting that came from that talk is somebody came up to me afterwards, and he's a coach, and he said, he works with clients on the issue of perfectionism, and he tells them that perfection just doesn't exist. Because it is a subjective thing, because it's so fluid, it's actually not even real. That's one way to look at it. But afterwards, I was thinking about, is that really true? Have you ever looked really closely at a flower or images of snowflakes or little babies' toes? They have the most perfect little toes. Or like really looked into the eyes of somebody you love. In those moments, there's that feeling that you're really experiencing perfection. And you can really experience that beauty, that witnessing of perfection in any given moment. So again, it's important to remember that perfection is everywhere. Perfection is in existence, just simply in whatever is in existence. And that means in your ever-changing life, that means in your ever-changing view, that means in you. And so the important thing is to stay in motion and stay in action. And that is what is going to allow you to create and put out into the world what you want to create. So before we say goodbye, I wanted to make an essential oil recommendation, which is something that I always do. And really, there are so many oils that can help with this. It just kind of depends on how perfectionism might show up in your life. Oh, I see there's a question coming through. I'll get to it in just a moment. And so the oil I picked is Motivate. It's called the Encouraging Blend by Doterra. And I picked this oil because I see that the biggest problem with procrastination is this sense of holding back, this sense of holding yourself back from doing what you want or need to do. And Motivate is an awesome oil to help you with this. So I use this oil generally when I'm feeling really low in energy, but I have something important to do. Like I have a conversation I need to have with somebody, or a presentation I have to make, or just like a pile of emails I need to get through. And I want to have that energy and that vitality. And this oil is pretty magical with that. It contains peppermint, clementine, coriander, basil, yuzu, melissa, rosemary, and vanilla. So you can imagine it smells quite amazing. And the peppermint really gives it that fresh, sparkly, energizing feeling. And those citrus oils are uplifting. So you can literally just inhale from the bottle. You can put a drop in your hands and take a deep breath in and then rub it on the back of your neck, and that'll leave a nice tingling feeling. And you can also, of course, diffuse it in a diffuser so that it's in the atmosphere and you're breathing it in and it's helping to keep you motivated and energized. So I find that oil to be really supportive if you're feeling a little stuck and you need some momentum to push you forward. So let me just take a look at the chat. Thank you for this topic. Just having connection problems. Okay, Emmy, do you have a question? If so, you can just type it into the chat and I can answer for you. So how do you feel perfectionism is showing up in your life? And in what ways might it be holding you back? Okay, so Emmy writes, it shows up every day with studying and fitness, exercise. Can you elaborate more on how to overcome perfectionism, procrastination, and paralysis? Yes, great question. So I know it sounds extraordinarily simplistic, but having something that you can say to yourself when you realize that you are making excuses for not doing something. So the examples you brought up are studying and fitness. So can you tell me a little bit more about how perfectionism gets in the way? Is it that you're not making time for it? Let me know how it shows up for you, because it's going to be different for everybody. But if it's in the form of procrastination and paralysis, the first step is to notice that it's happening. So, let's say you have to study and you're putting it off because you feel like you don't have enough time. You only have an hour and you feel like you need 5 hours. Okay, so I'm just going to put it off until I have a 5-hour period of time to work on it. She says, yes, great. So first of all, notice that. Okay, here, I'm doing it again. There's something that I need to do or something that I want to do, and I'm making it seem bigger than it is. I don't know how long it's going to take me because I haven't even started yet. So just notice, and then say something to yourself to remind you. So it might be those 3 P's. Perfectionism leads to procrastination, leads to paralysis. Oh yeah. Then you can say, just do it. Sit down, set a timer. If you know you only have a limited amount of time, set a timer and know you have this much time, and understand that progress is what's important. Action is what's important. And then when the time is up and you have to close your book and move on to whatever is next, say to yourself, that was perfect. That was perfect because I got something done. And even if it's not complete and you have more to do, reward yourself with that idea. That was perfect for me right now because all I had was an hour and I did it and I used it. So that's perfect for me right now in this moment. So it's really important to acknowledge when you're making excuses and then just overcome the excuse anyway. For example, what I told you about being at that event on Sunday, well, I can tell you, I knew that they were having this lightning round where they were opening it up for people to speak, and my first thought was, oh, I want to speak. And then instantly the excuses started coming in. Oh, but you're not prepared. Nobody's going to be interested in your topic. You're not wearing a nice enough outfit. There's a lot of men here. They're not going to be interested in hearing about perfectionism. All kinds of things. And it literally wasn't until the last second when the facilitator said there's one more spot left that I raised my hand, but I had to literally just overcome the excuse. And that comes with practice. And I really feel like having those little trigger slogans to remind you is what's going to help you. And the more that you just overcome the excuse, the more natural that's going to be. Is that helpful? Do you have further questions about that? How do we overcome perfectionism's negative talk? You know, I'm not sure that that is ever overcome. Like, the negative talk is always going to be there. It's just recognizing that that's all it is, and not listening to it and choosing to take action instead, even if it's not, like I said with the studying example. Just because you don't have 5 hours doesn't mean you can't do 1 hour. And if you can do 1 hour, that's perfect for you. So it comes with the habit, right? So if you're in the habit of allowing the excuses to run the show, then that's become a habit for you. So now you need to replace it with the habit of not listening to the excuse. And the only way to do that is to practice. So you say and it's step by step, right? So you can declare to yourself right now, the next time I hear that excuse, the next time I hear myself making an excuse, I'm going to say, perfectionism leads to procrastination, leads to paralysis, and I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm going to see how that feels. So really approaching things from a place of curiosity is hugely liberating. I like to see life as a grand experiment, and that we're just always experimenting and having fun. So now you get to experiment with not allowing the negative talk to win. You're going to experiment with overcoming it and doing it anyway and seeing how that feels. And you can set a length of time. For the next 2 weeks, I am not going to let the negative talk run the show. For the next 2 weeks, when I hear the excuses rise up, I'm going to leapfrog over them and just do it anyway and see how that feels. And at the end of 2 weeks, I'm going to pause and look back on my experiment and see the results. And chances are you're going to like the results and you're going to want to keep going. So it's a habit. I mean, I could say, I started working on this maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I don't feel like a perfectionist anymore. I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist. I would say I hold myself to high standards and I hold my life to high standards, but I don't let excuses hold me back ever. And I make it a point to be brave. Like if I am feeling nervous about something, that's when I just do it, because I'm not afraid of it not going so well. So it's about really just allowing things to just happen and see how it goes. So is that helpful, seeing it as an experiment? Let me know. Procrastination paralysis is a big problem in my life. Example, today I have to write many letters of appeals and I've been trying to do it since Thursday. It's been many, many days lost in paralysis. So why are you in paralysis? I was thinking about going to the library to write today. And why didn't you? I love my room with big computer. Okay. And food and comfort. Gotcha. It's 4:30 p.m. and I still have not started writing. Okay, I hear you, but why haven't you started writing? I still don't understand that. I'm afraid that what I write will not be good enough. Okay, so thank you. That's really what I was looking for. Okay, so there's a couple important things that you said. You use the word I've been trying to do it since Thursday. And trying is an extremely disempowering word, and it doesn't mean anything. You're either doing something or you're not doing it. So it's not that you've been trying, it's that you have not been doing it, right? So you're either doing it or you're not doing it. Trying doesn't mean anything. It doesn't count for anything. Try your best doesn't mean anything. Do your best means something. So I really want you to remember that. There's no such thing as trying. And if you're saying that you're trying, but nothing is happening, the truth is you're just not doing it. So the first thing is to eliminate that word from your vocabulary and never refer to it again. If it's something that you're saying in your mind, I've been trying, then know that the answer is no, you haven't been doing it. So knowing that can be helpful. Now, in terms of being afraid it's not good enough, again, this relates directly to what I was just saying about the willingness to experiment with something different. So making a declaration to yourself is where to start. And it's up to you how long you want your experiment to be. I think starting with 2 weeks is great. So starting from today for the next 2 weeks and see what the date is. I'm not going to allow my excuses or my fear of not being good enough to hold me back. I'm just going to start whatever I need to do, and I'm going to do it. And at the end of 2 weeks, I'm going to look back at my results and see, so think of it as a project, an experiment for yourself. It's just a game, and see how it feels. Now, in terms of the strategy of actually getting it done, when you have a whole entire day to get something done, that's actually a disservice to you, because there are no parameters around time, which is why you've had all day and it's 4:30 and you haven't done anything, because somewhere in your consciousness you're seeing that you have all day. So you have to put parameters around your study time, your writing time, whatever it is you're working on. So you have to decide that in advance. The day is not done, so you can still say, I'm going to put 3 hours towards this, and you decide that time. Now, I work from home too, so I understand that sometimes it's helpful to get out of the house and be in a different space, and sometimes I want to be at home doing my work. Sometimes I have to be at home doing my work. So I decide what my work schedule is on any given day. So most days I make sure that I'm sitting down at my computer by 9 a.m., which means I wake up at a certain time and I do my morning routine. I walk my dog, I have breakfast, I do some exercise, I do all of that before 9 o'clock in the morning. And I sit down at 9 a.m. to do what I need to do. I usually have several appointments, conversations with people throughout the day. And then I decide what time my workday is over so that I'm not seeing it as, oh, well, I have until midnight to answer these emails. No, I'll look at my agenda for the day and say, okay, my last, like today, for example, I have a call with somebody from 5:30 to 6:30. I would like to have half an hour after that to just complete any emails or anything that's outstanding. And therefore, I'm deciding that my workday ends at 7 p.m. tonight. And then I have my evening to do what I want to do. If I don't do that, then I can be working right up until I go to bed, and that's not helpful for me, because then I have a really hard time falling asleep and I don't sleep well. My brain is too active. I need a lot of time to wind down in order to have a really good night's sleep. I know that about myself, and I think that's true for most people. So you have to set those parameters. That's the only way that you're going to get things done. So you set the parameters and you be dedicated to that experiment of not listening to the excuses. And it's not about trying your best, you do your best. It's not ever about trying. So I'm going to stop now. I thank you so much for your questions. They were fantastic. And whenever someone has a specific personal experience that you can relate, that's the most rich learning experience that anybody can have. So I encourage that from anybody that has a question to really tell me, how does this specifically apply to your life? And we can dive into that. So that was great. And do send me your other question via email. So it's been such a pleasure today. Thank you to those of you who are live and to those of you who are listening to the recording. And I look forward to our session next week.